Peace, love, liberty, radio.
And the walls come crashing down as the war at home reaches your town. You have no choice, it's safe and clean. We all submit to the war machine.
It's episode 277. It's hard to believe, right? It seems like it was just yesterday that I was doing episode 200 and then episode 250, and now I'm up over 275, episode 277. And as per my tradition, and I guess it's sort of a tradition, seems like every 100 episodes or so there's some kind of minor tweak to the show. I will be doing some kind of something different with the intro coming up, episode 300, just to, sort of keep things fresh a little bit, change things up, if you will. But the show is still going to be the same. I might wind up including an extra break somewhere in the show. If you listen, you know that there's the 3 segments, each one roughly 9 minutes long, and then I've got the commercials. So I might wind up changing it, having first segment be 7 or 8 minutes, second segment about as long, third segment about as long, and then have like a 2 or 3 minute segment at the very end. I'm not sure. It's something that I'm mulling around. So if you have thoughts on the format of the show, or if there's something that you would like to see me do differently after episode 300 when I start making changes, and of course I'll be working on the changes leading up to episode 300. So it's not like I'm asking for advice and then episode 300 I'll say, okay, so here's the advice that people have. No, so send over your advice. Send that to advice@fppradio.com. Or really just, fill in the blank at fppradio.com. It will all still come into my email box. Now, there's something that I wanted to talk about ever since I received it in the mail, but I have not really had the opportunity to do so until today. And the reason that I say I've not had the opportunity to do so is I've not had the opportunity to do so without it basically seeming like, hey, everybody, listen to what I got in the mail. But that's kind of what it is. But there's news related to this thing, or this person particularly. And the news comes from the Hit and Run blog over at Reason.com, and it's dated January 14th of this year. So fresh news came out yesterday. And actually, the news from yesterday is about something that happened on Wednesday. But nonetheless, the article here from Reason begins, Ross Ulbricht, convicted and sentenced to life in prison last year for running the darknet sales website Silk Road, had his legal team file an appeal. The writer here, Brian Doherty, says, I reported on his lawyer Joshua Dratel's initial appeal plans right after sentencing. And you may recall, if you've listened to the show for a while, that I've covered this case. I won't say from the beginning, because the beginning was 2013 when the Silk Road got shut down, but really from the beginning of when the trial happened, and the trial was about a year ago. Ross Ulbricht was convicted in, I believe, May of last year. And there was a lot of, to steal a term from, I forget who the football announcer is, but to steal the term trickeration, there was a lot of trickeration that happened in the Ross Ulbricht trial. And some of that dealt with things that the prosecutor and the judge told the defense, you're not allowed to mention. And one of those things that the defense was not allowed to mention was the fact that there were some corrupt agents involved in the investigation. Why were they not allowed to mention the corrupt agents? Well, because there was an ongoing investigation. You can't interfere with our investigation, Joshua Dratel. If you mention these corrupt agents, then that will just screw up our investigation, and we will not be able to convict these corrupt agents. So we're going to throw your client under the bus, back the bus up, pull it forward again, back it up again, and then pull forward and then back up a couple more times, because that's what we do. So, no, we cannot risk the investigation at the expense, or have your client's civil liberties be protected at the expense of our investigation. No, no, no! So, these corrupt agents wound up being investigated. They ultimately pled guilty, and they're getting like 5 and 6 years in prison, whereas Ross Ulbricht was sentenced to life in prison. The article here from Reason continues. It says, the defense's main point of contention, as specifically expressed in the suit, in forceful all capital letters, and it's below, and I'll get to it here in just a second. Interpolated will be excerpts and summations from me, that's Brian Doherty, and of course, yours truly, Darryl W. Perry. I, of course, will stop reading at points and throw in my 2 cents, if you will, or my Satoshi if you prefer using Bitcoin. But nonetheless, I digress. Interpolated with excerpts and summations from Brian Doherty, and more extended quotes from the appeal explaining what the defense's contentions mean. And they begin. The court abused its discretion and denied Ulbricht his Fifth and Sixth Amendment rights to due process, the right to present a defense and a fair trial by A, precluding the defense from using at trial the evidence related to DEA Special Agent Carl Force's corruption, B, refusing to order the government to provide additional discovery and Brady material regarding corruption, and C, denying Ulbricht's motion for a new trial based on additional post-trial disclosures regarding Force and another corrupt law enforcement agent involved in the Silk Road investigation. The article now goes to things written by Brian Doherty. He says, here's some previous reporting on Force and his corruption, and then he posts links to those previous stories that I may or may not get into later in the show, time permitting. He was a DEA agent who did a lot of the communication with Dread Pirate Roberts, the pseudonym of the pseudonym of the operator of the Silk Road, and was responsible for entrapping him into an alleged murder for hire. Force also leaked info about the ongoing investigation to DPR in exchange for Bitcoin payoffs. DPR, of course, being the initials of Dread Pirate Roberts. So from henceforth, when I say DPR, I am, of course, referring to Dread Pirate Roberts, who may or may not actually be Ross Ulbricht. And I realize that this is kind of confusing and can be very confusing, but my understanding was there may have been several people who at any given time were the Dread Pirate Roberts. Ross Ulbricht created the website, Silk Road. He admits to having created the website, Silk Road. He also admits to having been caught operating the Silk Road at the very end. But he contends that he was not always Dread Pirate Roberts. So Dread Pirate Roberts may or may not have been Ross Ulbricht at any given time. There's more. Stay tuned.
Why do they hate us? Is libertarianism compatible with Islam? Dahvi Barker answers these questions and more in Voluntary Islam and Other Essays. He advances the voluntarist cause with analysis of the confluence of values between Islam and libertarianism, as well as contemporary movements from the Tea Party to the Arab Spring. Voluntary Islam by Dahvi Barker is available from Amazon.com and all major bookstores. Bitcoin Not Bombs is a launching pad for nonprofits and social entrepreneurs into the financial freedom of the Bitcoin economy. Bitcoin Not Bombs offers premium publicity campaigns designed to facilitate an organization's adoption of Bitcoin as a payment system. Bitcoin Not Bombs is fully committed to being the hub of the nonprofit sector of the Bitcoin economy, maximizing the potential cross-promotion of all our clients and commercial partners. To learn more, visit bitcoinnotbombs.com. You can support FPP Radio by shopping online. Whether you're looking for precious metals, bitcoins, or books, you'll find that and more at shop.fppradio.com. Every purchase you make from one of my affiliates, like Namecheap, Spendabit, and Amazon at shop.fppradio.com helps fund FPP Radio. Or you can shop directly from FPP with Bitcoin in the Bitcoin store. That's shop.fppradio.com.
You're listening to Peace, Love, Liberty Radio with Darryl W. Perry. Online at fppradio.com.
So before I get back into the story here from Reason about Rolf Ulbricht, who at any given time may or may not have been Dread Pirate Roberts, Rolf Ulbricht may or may not have been the guy that got duped into allegedly plotting a murder for hire that basically seems like it was complete entrapment from the get-go. But before I get back into that, I want to make sure that I tell you about Liberty.me. Liberty.me is more than just a social networking website. Of course, there is that social networking aspect to it. You can post your cat memes. You can post statuses. You can post links to stuff. That's basically what I use it for, is I post links to the Peace, Love, Liberty Radio, which is this podcast. I post links to the FPP Radio News, which is the 7-day-a-week news report that I do. And then I also post my weekly commentary using the WordPress blog that is integrated into my profile at Liberty.me. You don't get that with Facebook. You don't get that with Diaspora or any of the other social networks. You do not get a WordPress connected to your profile on any other social networking site that I'm aware of. You also, on those other social networking sites, don't have ebooks that are hosted for free by the social network themselves. You can get free ebooks at Liberty.me. You can get free audio content from Liberty.me. There are chat rooms. There's so much more there at Liberty.me. And, of course, it is a paid service. But you can save 10% when you sign up using my referral code FPP Radio. So go, Liberty.me, referral code FPP Radio. Now, back into the story here from Reason.com. And hopefully I did not confuse you by explaining that Dread Pirate Roberts, as referenced in this article, may or may not have been Rolf Ulbricht at any given time. Ulbricht, at 2 points in time, definitely were Rolf Ulbricht, but between those 2 points of time, there may have been one or more people who carried the moniker Dread Pirate Roberts. The article here continues. Draytel, in his appeal, continues to argue that Ulbricht, being the admitted launcher of the Silk Road, does not mean he was necessarily the Dread Pirate Roberts who continued to run it. He posits that the purely digital nature of most of the evidence linking DPR to Ulbricht could have been falsified, and that the agents deeply involved in the case are known to have been in the game essentially for the chance to steal Bitcoin. This leads the appeal to state that all the evidence against Ulbricht was permeated by corruption of 2 law enforcement agents participating in the investigation, the restrictions on cross-examination, and preclusion of expert witnesses offered to overcome those restrictions, and that all that eviscerated Ulbricht's defense and denied him a fair trial. Draytel tried during the trial to get it delayed until the case against Force had been adjudicated. The defense only learned of the case's evidence about a month before the Ulbricht trial began, but nonetheless, the defense's request was, you guessed it, denied. The existence of a second corrupt agent on the case, Treasury agent Sean Bridges, who worked for the Secret Service, was not revealed to the defense until the trial was over. Despite the government's insistence that the investigation had to be kept secret, both of the accused were already well aware that they were under investigation. The filing contains much detail about their behavior that would make one wonder about the veracity of any investigatory information they were responsible for. The appeal offers the suggestion that whomever was DPR at the height of the investigation may have been tipped off by force enough to attempt to falsely implicate Ulbricht. And let me pause here to state that there were other things that Ulbricht's defense was not allowed to bring up. There were witnesses, expert witnesses for the prosecution, who wound up not testifying, so the affidavits that they filed were accepted at face value and as fact. One of those affidavits being the affidavit of the guy that allegedly found where the location of the server was. And I don't have the info in front of me, but basically a magical leprechaun riding a unicorn flew down from the sky, a Pegasus unicorn, by the way, a magical leprechaun riding a Pegasus unicorn, flew down from the heavens and spoke to him in a soft, gentle voice and said, "Agent, I can tell you the location of the server." And then flew the guy, because remember, Pegasus unicorn, Pegasi can fly, and yes, Pegasi is the correct plural of Pegasus. Pegasi are able to fly. And because it's a Pegasus unicorn, they can fly super fast. So the federal agent got on the back of this Pegasus with the magical leprechaun, and they flew magically and instantaneously found the server of the Silk Road that was being hosted on Tor, which is the Onion router, which is supposed to be something that is incredibly, incredibly difficult to locate the location of, because you don't use IP addresses in the same way that you do on a regular website. And, of course, that's not what was written in this agent's testimony, but the things that were written in this agent's testimony don't hold up to science anymore or the laws of computing any more than the story I just told about the flying Pegasus unicorn and the magical leprechaun. And you should not believe the story about the flying Pegasus unicorn, not because they don't exist, but because they would never do something so evil. But I digress. So the agent gave this affidavit explaining how he found it using things that do not fit with the laws of computing. And even if they did fit with the laws of computing, they would be completely illegal and thus further violative of the rights of Rolf Ulbricht. And Rolf Ulbricht even filed, or rather his attorney filed something saying that the evidence on the location of the server should be thrown out because of Fourth Amendment grounds. The judge says, well, he would have to say that it's his in order for the Fourth Amendment to apply. So he has to admit that he's guilty before we can say that the evidence was gained illegally. But at that point, he will have already been convicted, and so therefore you're screwed, basically. The story here continues. The appeal continues to propose the alternate theory that Bitcoin exchange operator Mark Karpeles, or Karpeles, I've heard it pronounced both ways, might have been DPR operating the site during the period of the investigation. Karpeles is currently facing criminal charges in Japan related to embezzlement from his collapsed exchange, Mt. Gox, which, by the way, stands for Magic the Gathering Online Exchange. So, just an interesting bit of information. Mt. Gox, which at one time was the largest Bitcoin exchange, started out basically as some sort of nerd forum for people that liked playing Magic the Gathering, and somebody was like, hey, here's this digital currency, and let's give nerds a way to buy it. And they were like, yeah, I like that. There's more from this article, plus the very special letter that I got in the mail in just a moment. Stay tuned to Peace, Love, Liberty Radio.
Hey, this is Michael Dean from the Freedom Fiends radio show. I've been working with computer programmer Derek Slopey to create Fiend Phone. I'm using Fiend Phone right now to talk with and record one of my co-hosts in real time. Take it, Dahvi.
Hey, this is Dahvi Barker, and I'm 1,000 miles away from Michael, but we sound like we're in the same room.
We sure do, Dahvi. So, Dahvi, please tell the nice people more about FiendPhone.
FiendPhone is free, open-source software that opens up a global world of possibilities for collaborative, high-quality remote voice media production, and I'm digging it.
People can try the Windows beta version of FiendPhone right now at fiendphone.com. But we're also raising money to vastly improve FiendPhone and vastly improve independent talk media worldwide.
So go to fiendphone.com to help out. Who will build the audio roads? We will, with your help.
That's fiendphone.com. FEENPHONE.com. Foxtrot, Echo, November, phone.com.
FiendPhone. I never knew remote audio could be this good.
When her plush and comfy life suddenly and unexpectedly fell apart, Brooke and her dog Cloud set out to defy the odds. If this is a man's world, as they say, living on the streets is no place for a young woman. One day she awoke in the redwood forest and realized she had become a hobo, and would ultimately come to know exactly what it means to survive. How to Be a Hobo by Brooke Willett is available from Amazon.com and all major bookstores.
You're listening to Peace, Love, Liberty Radio with Darryl W. Perry.
So before I jump back into the story, and actually I think I do believe that I'll read the letter before I continue with the story, but I want to make sure that I tell you a way that you can support this show and actually wind up getting perks of your own. So it's not just, hey, give me money. It's give me, some money, and then I will provide you product and service. Hopefully, you find it to be a valuable service. And what is the service? Well, one of the services is you get commercial-free versions of the podcast. And that shortens the show by about 3 minutes. And then it shortens the newscast by about another minute. So you get something that most people are not getting. You also wind up every month getting in your mailbox a copy of the newspaper that I publish. And depending on what level of donor you become, there are other perks you can receive. You can get autographed copies of my books. You can get the audiobook version absolutely free of charge of my most recent book, A Rebel's Journey, My Path to Liberty. And there are other perks that you can get. If you donate at a certain level, you can become an executive producer of the show, and you're listed in the show notes as an executive producer. And that includes a plug for your website or organization or an organization that you really like. And you can find out more about the Fans program. That's the program where you donate and you get perks and you help me out. Fans are friends, allies, and numerous supporters. You can find out more or join the Fans program by going to fans.fppradio.com. That's fans.fppradio.com. So before I get back into the story from Reason.com about the appeal of Ross Ulbricht, I have a letter from Ross that I got right around Christmas time, and I have not had a chance to share it. I wanted to share the letter, but it seems as though this is the perfect time to share the letter from Ross. So it's dated Sunday, December 20th, 2015, and the letter begins, Darryl, recently, Lynn, that's his mother, by the way, recently, Lynn told me how you've been a longtime supporter of ours on your radio show and in publications, and that you even organized a fundraiser. And I did. I organized a Free Ross live auction at Keenvention that happened the final weekend of October. So it was like the end of October, beginning of November. And Roger Ver, who is widely referred to as Bitcoin Jesus, actually wound up matching the winning bids on that. And there were a couple $100 raised for the Ross Ulbricht appeal. So that's what he is mentioning here when he mentions the fundraiser. The letter here continues. He says, thank you so much for all you've done for me, being cut off from the world and in a dire situation. It really means a lot to know that someone like you is in my corner. Hopefully, someday I can shake your hand as a free man and thank you in person. Kind regards, Ross. And I know that chances are, Ross, you will never hear this episode, or if you do, it will probably be many years later. But I look forward to meeting you. I really do look forward to meeting you and sitting down, having a conversation, enjoying a good beer. I don't know if you drink or not, but enjoying a cold beverage together, or if you want a glass of hot tea, that's fine too. But I do look forward to meeting you at some point in the future, Ross, and hopefully it is sooner rather than later. Now, back to the article from Reason.com. The article continues. Joshua Draytell, that's Ross's attorney, also argued the unfairness of being denied cross-examination on some government computer forensic experts, and then also denied introduction of some of his own witnesses on those issues. The appeal notes that they not only prove that excluded evidence regarding force would have changed the verdict, merely that it had a reasonable probability of doing so. The next point. The court abused its discretion by curtailing cross-examination and the defense theory at trial. The author of the article, Brian Doherty, cuts in here to say the court eventually refused to allow questioning of one witness, a Homeland Security agent from Chicago, Jared Duryegayan, over his belief for a time that Karpeles might be DPR. This, Draytell insists, goes precisely to their defense of raising reasonable doubt that Ulbricht was DPR during the time of the investigation. The next issue. The court abused its discretion in precluding two defense experts. Draytell insists that two computer expert witnesses that were not permitted to bring to the stand prevented... Hold on, let me read this again because it doesn't sound completely right. Draytell insisted that two computer expert witnesses that they were not permitted to bring to the stand prevented the jury from understanding certain abstruse aspects of the government's case, particularly pertaining to Bitcoin wallets. Thus, quote, by precluding the defense experts who would have countered the complex testimony regarding Bitcoin presented by the government witnesses' testimony essentially went unchallenged, and Ulbricht was denied his Fifth and Sixth Amendment right to present a defense. Many elements of the testimony of FBI Special Agent Ilwan Yum that denied witnesses were meant to clarify or contest were revealed to the defense, Draytell says, far too late in the process, including in many cases after the trial had started. In summation, while the government was permitted to present testimony regarding extremely complicated processes outside the ken of the average juror, Ulbricht was denied the vital opportunity to challenge that testimony and evidence, some of which was generated and provided only mid-trial shortly before its admission, and therefore the court's preclusion of the two defense experts was an abuse of discretion. The next point. The court abused its discretion in precluding admission of Andrew Jones's statement against penalty interest pursuant to Rule 804, Section 3B, Fed Revised Evidence, and or Rule 807, Federal Revised Evidence. I'm guessing that's what the FED period R period EVID period stands for, is the Federal Rules of Evidence. Draytell tried to admit into evidence a statement by a former Silk Road administrator, Andrew Jones, that indicated DPR he was communicating with during the investigation a couple of months before Ulbricht's arrest in 2013 was not the same DPR who had first hired him, because he apparently wasn't able to respond properly to an agreed-upon prompt or an agreed-on prompt. This obviously would have supported the defense's assertion that despite being the founder of the Silk Road, Ulbricht was not DPR during the investigation. There's more to this article. It will be in the show notes. And don't forget, every Wednesday I answer your questions. Send those over, AMA at FPPradio.com.